Stop everything right now. If you are watching the major networks today, you are being fed a curated illusion of tactical superiority. They are showing you bright flashes in the night sky. They are celebrating a 93% interception rate of incoming projectiles over the Persian Gulf. They want you to believe that Operation Epic Fury is stabilizing the Middle East. They are lying by omission. Look closely at the intelligence back channels. According to preliminary estimates and satellite tracking data verified just hours ago by regional diplomatic leaks, an unprecedented institutional fracture has just occurred. Less than 24 hours after officially assuming the highest office under martial law in Tehran, the newly appointed Supreme Leader was urgently evacuated to a subterranean medical facility controlled by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Diplomatic cables indicate he has been temporarily incapacitated following a severe, highly coordinated internal security breach. I am going to show you why this is not a triumph for Washington and Tel Aviv. This is the single most catastrophic geopolitical miscalculation of the modern era. The television anchors are currently celebrating what they perceive as a successful strategic decapitation. They are operating under the naive assumption that neutralizing the head of a theocratic state will cause the entire apparatus to collapse into a manageable power vacuum. But in the cold, unforgiving reality of intelligence analysis, we know the exact opposite is true. The office of the Supreme Leader was never just a religious symbol. It was the institutional break. It was the singular mechanism keeping the most extreme military factions from crossing the point of no return. By removing that central authority figure from the equation, the West did not destroy the regime. They just activated its ultimate survival protocol. They inadvertently handed absolute, unchecked control of the nation's ballistic missile infrastructure and asymmetric warfare assets directly to the military generals. There are no more diplomatic red lines. There are no more back-channel negotiations. The central command has been fractured, birthing a decentralized, radicalized military apparatus that answers to no one. Before I show you how this exact miscalculation is currently bankrupting the United States military in real time, I need you to understand the gravity of this shift. Go to the comments right now and type the word fracture if you are beginning to see the true scale of this crisis. The mainstream narrative is crumbling, and we are documenting the collapse. The global intelligence community is now operating under a terrifying realization. The original plan was to project overwhelming force to deter further aggression. Instead, the architects of this operation have essentially decapitated the only entity capable of ordering a ceasefire, which brings us to the ultimate, unanswered strategic question. What happens when you remove the institutional restraint, hand the launch codes to the most radical commanders, and then suddenly realize your own multi-billion-dollar air defense shield is entirely running out of ammunition? To answer that question, we must step away from the political rhetoric and look directly at the brutal economics of modern asymmetric warfare. The Pentagon is currently trapped in a mathematical equation of absolute ruin. The television networks cheer every time a successful interception illuminates the night sky over the Gulf. They do not tell you the price tag of that flash. According to military logistics data and financial tracking from Bloomberg, the United States and its regional partners are actively firing Patriot and THAAD interceptor missiles, each valued between $3 million and $4 million, to neutralize incoming Shahed 136 drones that cost a mere $20,000 to assemble. Let me make this perfectly clear. You do not need a degree in advanced economics to understand this catastrophic backfire. The opposing armed factions and non-state actors are not trying to defeat the American military in a conventional head-to-head confrontation. That is an obsolete 20th century concept. They are executing a highly calculated strategy of financial and logistical exhaustion. They are forcing the Western alliance to bankrupt its own defense budget just to protect basic infrastructure. The adversaries are using mass-produced technological scrap metal to systematically drain the most sophisticated and expensive air defense network ever constructed by mankind. The architects of Operation Epic Fury believed they were projecting supreme power. Instead, they walked directly into a trap of strategic attrition. And even with that multi-billion-dollar shield operating at maximum capacity, the institutional collapse is already visible on the ground. Just hours ago, the statistics failed. A single unmanned aerial vehicle slipped through the advanced radar dragnet. It did not target a heavily fortified military base. It struck a critical government administration building in Kuwait, spreading fire across multiple floors and resulting in a catastrophic loss of infrastructure and severe casualties among administrative personnel. Think about the institutional implications of that event. One $20,000 piece of flying debris bypassed a billion-dollar early warning system and completely paralyzed a core bureaucratic nerve center of an allied nation. This is the grim reality of the power vacuum being created right now. Washington is bleeding its strategic interceptor stockpiles dry in a theater of war where victory is statistically impossible. Every million-dollar missile fired at a cheap drone is a missile that cannot be sent to Eastern Europe or the Pacific. The global deterrence doctrine is cracking under the weight of its own expense. The illusion of absolute impenetrable security has been permanently shattered. If a critical government facility in Kuwait can be removed from the equation so effortlessly by a low-tier weapon, the strategic implications for the surrounding economic powerhouses are absolutely terrifying. Let us shift our focus away from the smoldering administrative ruins in Kuwait City and look directly south, toward the glittering glass towers and vulnerable financial hubs of the United Arab Emirates. Let us shift our focus away from the smoldering administrative ruins in Kuwait City and look directly south toward the glittering glass towers and vulnerable financial hubs of the United Arab Emirates. The architects of Operation Epic Fury operated under a fatal assumption. They believed that launching strikes from the sovereign territories of regional partners would distribute the risk and project a unified front of deterrence. It is not a unified front. It is a diplomatic fracture of catastrophic proportions. According to preliminary estimates and aerospace tracking data, over 40% of the retaliatory unmanned aerial vehicles launched by the decentralized armed factions have not been aimed at military installations in the Mediterranean. They have been routed directly into the airspace of the United Arab Emirates. The financial capital of the Middle East has been unwillingly drafted into a war it never authorized. Now, let me show you the ultimate geopolitical backfire. Washington positioned its forces in these allied nations to serve as an impenetrable shield. But by utilizing Kuwaiti and Emirati airspace to conduct offensive maneuvers, the Pentagon essentially transformed these neutral economic powerhouses into legitimate primary targets for asymmetric warfare. The security umbrella did not protect them. It acted as a magnetic beacon for retaliation. The intelligence back channels are panicking over the preliminary casualty reports coming out of the Tactical Operations Center at the port in Kuwait. 6 members of the United States National Guard were eliminated. This represents a catastrophic loss that shatters the illusion of a sanitized, remote-controlled conflict. But the regional spillover is far more insidious. The leaders in Abu Dhabi and Kuwait City are realizing a terrifying truth. The presence of Western military assets on their soil is no longer a guarantee of survival. It is an active liability. The operation designed to secure the region has instead birthed a massive power vacuum, alienating the exact allies Washington relies upon to maintain its global logistics network. If the financial hubs of the Gulf are forced to absorb the retaliation meant for Western capitals, the entire diplomatic architecture of the Middle East will collapse overnight. You are watching the rapid disintegration of the Gulf Shield, but the systemic shockwaves do not end at the borders of these desert nations. The true cost of this tactical arrogance is being paid by the global markets. To understand the sheer scale of this economic devastation, we must leave the fractured alliances of the Gulf and travel directly into the epicenter of the retaliation. We must look at the sky over Tehran. Look at the sky over Tehran. It is no longer clear. It is a toxic, suffocating canopy of black smoke and contaminated precipitation. According to satellite tracking data and preliminary estimates from global environmental monitors, at least 4 core oil refineries on the outskirts of the capital have been completely neutralized by precision strikes. 17 million civilians are currently trapped beneath a localized ecological catastrophe, forced to endure a literal black rain falling upon their streets. The Western strategists who authorized this infrastructure decapitation calculated that destroying the energy sector would starve the regime of funds, collapse the local currency, and trigger a massive domestic uprising. It is a fatal miscalculation. It is an absolute failure of strategic foresight. Destroying the fundamental livelihood of 17 million people does not make them turn against their military commanders. It removes their final tether to a stable civilian life. When you incinerate the economy of a densely populated metropolis, you do not create a peaceful democratic revolution. You create a desperate, disenfranchised populace with absolutely nothing left to lose. By systematically destroying the civilian infrastructure, the architects of this operation have inadvertently created an endless, highly motivated recruitment pool for the most radical armed factions. They wanted to break the will of an adversary. Instead, they just forged a new generation of non-state actors operating purely on grievance. But the catastrophic loss extends far beyond the borders of the Middle East. The true cost of this infrastructure decapitation is being extracted directly from your retirement accounts right now. Look closely at the global financial terminals. The exact moment those refineries were removed from the equation, the international energy markets panicked. Brent crude oil violently breached the $100 per barrel threshold, sending an immediate, paralyzing shockwave through global supply chains. The paper economy is tearing itself apart. According to financial data from Bloomberg, the panic has already crossed the Pacific Ocean. The Nikkei index in Tokyo just vaporized by over 2,800 points in a matter of hours. European bond yields are spiraling out of control. This is not a standard market correction. This is institutional panic. The Western alliance used its military might to cripple a geopolitical rival, but in doing so, they accidentally set their own financial system on fire. They are trading tactical victories in the desert for severe stagflation at home. The very middle class funding these billion-dollar weapon systems is now paying the ultimate price at the gas pump and the grocery store. The strategy of overwhelming force has failed to contain the crisis. It has merely exported the devastation to the global markets. As we enter the fourth day of this uncontainable conflict, the immediate shock of the airstrikes is fading into something much darker. History is knocking on the door. History is knocking on the door. To understand the true magnitude of this disaster, you must look at the historical precedents of institutional collapse. The strategists in Washington are suffering from a catastrophic amnesia. They look at the Middle East and see a chessboard where pieces can simply be removed from the equation. But history proves that when you shatter a centralized government through overwhelming force, you do not get a compliant, stable society. You get a fractured wasteland. Look back at the interventions that dismantled the political institutions in Baghdad and Tripoli. The Western powers believed that neutralizing the central authority figure would usher in an era of peace. Instead, it birthed a chaotic, unmanageable power vacuum. When you back a nation into a corner, destroy its economy with sanctions, and contaminate its environment with black rain, the population does not surrender. They undergo a process of absolute radicalization. By incapacitating the Supreme Leader in Tehran, the architects of this war have inadvertently replicated the exact conditions that spawned the most relentless non-state actors of the past 20 years. They have replaced a predictable, unified adversary with a sprawling, decentralized network of independent armed factions. You cannot negotiate a ceasefire with a decentralized network of militants because there is no single leader left to sign a treaty. The West has engineered its own endless war, but the catastrophic backfire does not end in the desert sands. While the United States military is rapidly exhausting its interceptor stockpiles and alienating its critical Gulf allies, a much larger geopolitical pivot is happening entirely in the shadows. The absolute obsession with Operation Epic Fury has created a massive strategic blind spot. Look at the broader global map. The Pentagon has committed its most advanced naval assets, its carrier strike groups, and its premier air defense systems to a relentless war of attrition in the Middle East. Do you think the leadership in Beijing and Moscow is simply watching this unfold on television? They are actively and aggressively exploiting the distraction. By forcing the United States to pour billions of dollars into intercepting $20,000 drones, the Western alliance has effectively hollowed out the deterrence architecture in Eastern Europe and the Indo-Pacific region. A monumental power vacuum has opened up across two separate continents. The rival superpowers are quietly repositioning their maritime assets and consolidating their economic alliances, fundamentally reshaping the global order without launching a single missile. Washington is bankrupting its resources in a regional conflict, while its primary geopolitical adversaries are winning the long game by default. The pieces on the board are rapidly moving against the West. From the smoldering administrative ruins in Kuwait City to the panicked, collapsing financial markets in Tokyo and the contaminated, lawless streets of Tehran, the entire global system is buckling under the weight of this singular miscalculation. The illusion of control has completely evaporated. Now, we must look at the terrifying reality of what happens in the next 72 hours. Now, let me show you the terrifying reality of what happens in the next 72 hours. The intelligence community is modeling three distinct, catastrophic trajectories for this crisis, and none of them end in stabilization. You must prepare for what is coming. Scenario 1 is the absolute militarization of the power vacuum. With the religious leadership incapacitated, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps establishes total, unmitigated martial law. The institutional break is entirely removed from the equation. We are looking at a regime that no longer cares about domestic approval or diplomatic sanctions. They will accelerate their strategic timelines, transitioning their underground facilities into a permanent war economy and potentially sprinting toward ultimate deterrence capabilities. The West wanted a compliant government, but they are about to face a hyper-aggressive military dictatorship with nothing left to lose. Scenario 2 is the total bankruptcy of the Western air defense shield. The asymmetric attrition will violently accelerate. The decentralized armed factions will continue to launch $20,000 unmanned aerial vehicles by the thousands, not to hit specific targets, but to intentionally exhaust the interceptor stockpiles of the United States and its regional partners in the Gulf. We are approaching a mathematical breaking point where the multi-million-dollar Patriot and THAAD systems will simply run out of ammunition. When that happens, the financial capitals of the United Arab Emirates and the logistical hubs in Kuwait will be completely exposed to systemic infrastructure degradation. Scenario 3 is the black swan event that will fundamentally break the global economy. This is the ultimate backfire. The decentralized, radicalized military factions do not need to defeat the American Navy in a conventional maritime battle. They only need to weaponize the geography. By deploying asymmetric naval assets and smart mines in the Strait of Hormuz, they can effectively paralyze the transit of 329 supertankers. The moment that maritime choke point is compromised, Brent crude oil will not stop at $100. It will violently surge past $150 a barrel. The global supply chain will snap, triggering a massive wave of stagflation that will wipe out the paper wealth of the Western world. The mainstream media is not going to warn you about this impending economic fracture. They will keep showing you the bright flashes of interceptor missiles, pretending the situation is under control. It is not under control. The illusion of security has been shattered, and the cost of this geopolitical arrogance is about to be extracted directly from your personal finances. Do not let the television anchors blind you to the reality of the macro chessboard. Restructure your portfolios. Prepare for unprecedented market volatility. If you want to see the unvarnished intelligence and track the real shifts in global power before they hit the financial terminals, you must subscribe to this channel. The era of predictable geopolitics has ended. We are entering the age of asymmetric collapse. Stay vigilant.